Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's MarkMonitor webinar, Keeping Your Partners on Track, How to Protect Your Brand Online, where we'll be providing recommendations to strengthen your customer experience by monitoring your online brand representation and tackling challenges unique to your industry and partner channel. I'm Gina LaFleur of MarkMonitor. Now, before we begin our presentation, I'd like to run everyone through a few housekeeping items. During today's webinar, only the host will be able to see the list of all attendees. All participants' lines will be muted to ensure there is no background noise. Following our presentation, we will be holding a Q&A session. If you have a question at any time for our speaker during the presentation, feel free to submit it using the Q&A tab located on your screen. You can also submit your questions at the end of the session. For any questions our speaker won't have time to answer today, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the event. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today's presentation. We are joined by MarkMonitor Partner Compliance Expert, Daniel Morton. Dan is a product marketing manager with MarkMonitor. For much of his 5-year tenure, Dan was part of our managed services group where he led a team of 10 brand analysts and worked directly with customers in a variety of industries. Dan's experience covers business problems as diverse as affiliate and partner compliance, online traffic diversion, search engine advertising violations, social media brand abuse, and online celebrity impersonation. In his current role, Dan helps share his knowledge and communicate the intricacies of MarkMonitor brand protection with an emphasis on search engine advertising and partner compliance topics. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Dan to get us started.
Thank you, Gina. Let's go ahead and kick this off. I've got a lot of interesting content that I think everyone will like. I've taken a little bit of a different approach here, and I'm looking at partner compliance from an industry perspective first, and then we'll jump into more broad or generic partner compliance type recommendations. So as you can see here on this agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with some basic terminology. We're going to look at kind of a summary of the special challenges across these 4 different industries: the automotive, travel and leisure, also called the hospitality industry, the direct selling industry, and the insurance industry. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about how those feed into different business models and how even if you're not in those industries specifically, your company might work with the business model that is similar to these industries. And then the second part, we're going to talk about a little bit more broad workflow and remediation. And I'll talk through some different examples of workflow, and I've got an example of a soft letter that we can look at, and then follow up with just some tips. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, we're working out some kinks here. There we go. All right. So partners, many names, same function. So a lot of companies in different industries call their partners something different. So as you can see from this word cloud, there's a lot of different names that partners are called, from independent reps, consultants, maybe channel partners. You've heard affiliates is another type of partner, dealers we're going to be talking about, travel sellers. So they all go by different names, and your company may actually call your partners something different, but they're all along the same lines. And the way to think about partners is that they're third parties that your company has contractual agreement with to represent your brand. So these are folks that are out there selling your products to customers, and they are bound by some sort of an agreement. Now, with that, you have some pluses and minuses. So partners can extend your brand. They can access customers that your company may not have access to, and a lot of times they're experts in their channel. But that comes at a price. You lose some control of your brand when you hand it off to partners. And so in order to keep control of your brand, you have to have some rules in place. You have to have some guidelines. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Those rules obviously are for brand consistency and to create a level playing field for your partners so that they're not constantly in conflict with one another. And so a lot of these rules are what we're going to be looking at today. I've got many different examples across these different industries that are taken specifically from different partner agreements that I've researched over time. And so we'll go through those, and so you can get an idea of what might work for your company or your industry. So part one is the industry breakout. So this is just a high-level overview looking across the 4 different industries that we're going to be focused on today. So as you can see, partners are called something different across these different industries. Dealers, OTAs, affiliates, aggregators, independent reps, distributors, agents. And then if you look at the different challenges, so we'll start with automotive here. Special challenges for automotive dealers, if you have got a dealer network, is that they're very geographic based, right? So your dealers are going to be in specific cities, maybe even parts of cities if you're in a large metropolitan area. And then another challenge is that they sell multiple brands. A dealer will have, multiple types of cars that they're going to be advertising for. And so if you're an automotive company, you want to keep your brand front and center, and you don't want to have too much erosion of your brand with other brands. You don't want to get too mixed in. So we'll look at some guidelines focused on that. In the travel and leisure, the hospitality industry, you have a couple of different issues. You've got franchisees. So an example with a hotel where you have multiple hotels that are independently owned. These are franchise hotels. They each want to do their own branding underneath the parent brand. So there could be some issues there. Also with the travel space is that you have a lot of aggregators and different types of online travel agents that are out there trying to get exposure. And so you have high competition for paid ads, and I'll look at some different elements that you should include in your guidelines for those. Next is the direct sale company industry. This is a very unique industry, and it doesn't really cover one vertical. It covers multiple different product lines. But generally, if it's a direct sale company, your focus is on offline sales. And so when you have thousands of reps that are out there and they're all advertising, they're all running paid search ads, or they're putting up websites, that sort of thing, it can get very confusing very fast, and your brand can suffer as a result. And so with the focus in offline sales, these companies have got a lot of rules in place about where and when their reps can advertise online. There also tend to be inexperienced marketers. These are folks that have signed up maybe to make a little extra money. That's a different type of a marketer than, say, a dealer with their own. Maybe they've got a person that does marketing. So they're inexperienced marketers. And then they also tend to use social media pretty heavily. It's just natural for an individual to go out there and try to use social media. And so we've got some guidelines around those. And lastly is the insurance vertical, where you have your agents and independent reps. So insurance is similar to many other industries that are very highly regulated. And so the marketing that goes on in this industry has to go through a compliance department. It has to have certain elements to it, such as disclaimers and different things like that. Logos have to be correct. And there's a high penalty to the company or to the brand for noncompliance. And so that's something to keep in mind, and we'll look at some different things there. Now, looking at these 4 industries, you could also bucket these into 2 really broad categories that your company may fall into. If you look at automotive, travel, and hospitality, that kind of falls under a dealer model or franchise model. And then if you look at direct sale companies, insurance, maybe some finance might fall under there, real estate, you have this agent model where you have an actual person that is offering the products to be sold to other people. A lot of times that's in person. And so even though you may not fall into one of these 4 industries specifically, those broad categories or those broad business models are something to keep in mind as we're going through these, because they apply across industries. So let's jump into the automotive space here. Okay, so what we have, partners are generally called dealers, And as we mentioned, the challenges are that they're geographically based and that dealers have multiple brands. And so where should your monitoring focus be for automotive dealers or for dealers of any sort? While I do say automotive, it also could be motorcycles, RVs, generators, anything of that nature, any type of a dealer type of a business model. So the domain name ownership, we see a lot of different types of abuse when it comes to domain name ownership. Companies that want to buy up domains that are in different geographic areas or have different brands in them, multiple brands, which are against a lot of rules. And then the website content is a big thing here, is that, the different links to other manufacturers off of the home page, or if you have a brand and it's dedicated to, that page is dedicated to that brand, and then they have content for other manufacturers, that's something that nobody likes, the brand won't like. And so we'll go through some of those right now. So on the domain front, these are some common guidelines that are that we found in different agreements, different automotive company agreements for their partners. So if somebody is doing domain or doing paid search ads, they require a custom domain name. That makes sense because you don't want 1,000 dealers all pointing their ads at one location because they'll start competing for that display URL. And I've got another example a little later on. Obviously, also in the domain, you cannot mention the names of other manufacturers. That just will confuse people. And then should not include broad geographic coverage. So I've got just some examples down here just to kind of show you what that might look like. And for this entire presentation, what I've done is I've tried to remove any sort of customer names or company names, and we've replaced it with a more generic brand. So you'll see like brand Houston, Texas. So you can replace brand with your own brand or, a brand that you're working with. So if we look at the next slide, we've got some website content guidelines. So like I mentioned, no links to other manufacturer sites. This is a given. Also, sometimes you have this, in order to prevent the erosion of a brand, you want to keep one page dedicated to that brand. And we'll see that in the travel and leisure space when it comes to landing pages. But it makes sense that if I'm a dealer and I'm selling multiple cars, that I might want to put, whatever the specials are on one page. Well, manufacturers like to have a page just dedicated to their brand. And so, and especially if the domain name has that brand in it, that page should be dedicated to that brand. And then an interesting guideline I came across was that normally on a website that's dedicated to a brand, that dealer should only offer complementary products. And this is in place to prevent the dealer from eroding the brand further and having a customer kind of not know what they're doing on that page. If it's too confusing, if they're selling cars and they're also selling chairs and they're selling who knows what, then there could be a big problem there. So this rule is obviously in place for that purpose. And then kind of with a box next to it, I've got this advertising messages that shout distressed merchandise are not allowed. So you don't want to have any of these types of words in your messaging if this is your focus, right? A lot of times brands do not want their merchandise to be seen as cheap and they want a more premium brand. So you would not have these types of words in your advertising on the website, in a paid search ad, and that sort of thing. And these are just some samples that I found. Now, the last one, parked pages, may need a little explanation. So what we see a little bit at Mark Monitor is where a dealer will register a domain name and it will have the brand in the domain name, but then it'll just go to a parked page. For the brand, that's not very good. I've got an example on the next page we can walk through here. where you have, for example, dealer name, brand, location. So if it were, Dan's Automotive and the brand and HoustonTexas.com, and it ended up on a parked page, that should obviously be redirected to the brand or to the dealer's actual page. That's just another guideline worth looking into, and then worth monitoring for. Now, also in this example, I've got some different paid search ads. Cheap brand parts, so you can insert your company name there, and then genuine parts, genuine brand parts. Both of these are a no-go, a lot of times because the ad is directing to pages that are confusing. They're not the dealer's own parts. They are, maybe they're selling multiple parts and that sort of thing. And so an automotive company would not want this. They would want to go directly to the authorized outlets for their parts. So that's kind of an overview of the automotive space. So now let's turn our attention to the travel and hospitality space. So this, again, kind of falls under that dealer franchise type of a model. And what you have here, you have partners that are called online travel agents, affiliates, aggregators, franchisees. And those are two different things, right? So a franchisee is a person that maybe owns a hotel, and it has a certain banner for a certain company, whereas online travel agents and affiliates and aggregators are people that are trying to get folks to purchase travel packages or flights or cars through their sites. And so we'll look at some different examples for both of those. Now, the challenge is you have different types of partners in this case, and also there's the high competition for paid ads. And so it introduces a lot of different branding challenges there. So your monitoring focus in the travel and leisure should definitely be in your paid ad keyword use, especially with the different online travel agents and affiliates that may be bidding on your keywords, driving up your keyword costs, that sort of thing. And then also the text in the ads themselves and to make sure that they're consistent with your brand. And then the landing page. So when somebody clicks on an ad, where do they go? Do they go on a page that has multiple brands? If they do, and they are bidding on your keyword and they're putting your name in the ad, and they're then landing on a page that offers your product along with competing products, that should be a no-go. And then finally, domain names. And similar to the automotive space is if you have domain names that are confusing, that have multiple locations or too broad of locations, this especially applies to the franchisees. So this is a bit dense. This text I did this on purpose, both because I pulled it from different agreements and different policies to show you, but then also I know that these PowerPoints are going out to the folks on this call, and so you can use it as kind of a note backup. So let's talk about domains and websites. So a lot of times, if it's an OTA, they must clearly indicate that they're a travel agency and that they're operating the website. They can't have a website that looks like a brand. Again, this comes back to customer confusion. The whole goal of a lot of these policies is just to avoid that customer confusion. You want your brand to not be eroded by the actions of your partners. And so this would be one of those that falls under that category. It cannot claim to be an official website of the brand. Again, same reason. It cannot use brand trademarks in the domain name. This is similar again to the automotive. I bolded here, including typos. That's one thing that a lot of times we forget, is that even today, you still have people that are going to search for a domain and they're going to type it actually into the URL bar. And now, browsers like Chrome have gotten good about correcting misspellings, and they'll have a little pop-up that says, do you mean, XYZ? And you can click yes, go there. Or they'll say, I'm showing results for what we thought you meant. But, a lot of times you have partners across all industries that will register typos, and they'll put up, their their page on there. And so if somebody goes to that page and they stay on it, that can be a bit confusing for the customer. So cannot include trademarks in the metadata or the title tags. This comes up in search engine results. Is, if somebody is screaming your brand and they're on the first page of a search engine, then again, it may be confusing to customers or to potential customers. Cloaking. So this is an interesting topic that, I think probably a lot of people don't really talk about, but it's presenting one type of content to the search engine but redirecting visitors to another type of content. So you can do this maybe in paid ads. You can also do this in the actual organic search. We've seen it where anybody typing in the domain directly will get one type of page, where somebody coming in from a search engine will get another type of page. Obviously, all this should be not allowed, and it's not good for the brand. No hidden text, such as trademarks, typos in the background color. We don't see this as much, but I think that it still happens. One that might be worth looking at is alternative text for images. All of this is the purpose of all of this is, again, to try to get higher search ranking for particular brands. And these are just different types of tricks to kind of keep an eye out for. So moving on to paid search from the travel and hospitality example. A lot of guidelines will say you may not use the branded trademarks or typo as keyword terms. And we talked about this a little bit. And this goes into the fact that I like to use the example of let's say a cruise company, where you have somebody that's specifically looking for that cruise company. They should go directly to that cruise company's homepage and purchase the cruise there. If when they're looking for that cruise company, they see paid search ads that show up that maybe will be trying to redirect them, and these are actual OTAs or online travel agencies, that cruise company now has to pay commissions to those companies. What they should be doing instead is getting the crumbs. So if I'm looking for a cruise to, let's say, the Bahamas, and I type in cruises to the Bahamas, just a generic phrase, then sure, show the ads, show as many as you want. Those OTAs then can get those people that are not specifically looking for a brand. So this first line and then the second line, which is when purchasing generic destination-related keywords, a lot of times the brand should require a negative match on those trademarks so that those ads are not shown. And a negative match simply is that if I'm doing a search for, we'll say brand, to the brand cruises to the Bahamas, then that OTA's ad should not be shown. Because the brand is in there, I don't want those ads to be shown, because that's what the negative match will do. And then ad text with the brand name can only be used if the landing page is substantially dedicated to the brand and does not contain competing products. So this I talked about a little bit earlier, where you have a paid ad running and it has the brand name in it. You want the landing page to be substantially, entirely really, dedicated to that brand. If you have competing products on there, again, that's not good for brand equity. And then social media. So may not use the brand as usernames or in profile pictures. So we may not use the logo in profile pictures. You'll see this sometimes, especially in the next industry we'll talk about, which is the direct selling industry. It's going to go across the board with social media. You just don't want that trademark to be used as a username. And for brand purposes, that should be your real estate, not your partners. And I've got a few examples here that we can look at. So again, these were anonymized to protect the guilty. And we've got a couple of different paid search ads here that went to different sites. So that first one, and I replaced the actual company with the word brand again. And so you can see brand cruise deals. This went to a generic landing page that offered all kinds of different cruises. the ad also showed up when we looked for, the brand plus the word cruises or cruise deals. And so if with this actual example, that company should have been negatively matching the brand name, and they should not have been using it in the text of the ad. And then this other example is also similar, where they used the brand in the text of the ad, and they took you to a generic page. Any type of instance of this, whether you're a cruise or a hotel or an airline, these are all, leakage from the revenue bucket, because you're now paying commissions to these companies if they book a cruise through you. And if they don't, they may be going with a competitor, and they're using your brand name to do it. So this next section, we'll talk about the direct sale company. And we've got a large variety of names for partners in this industry or this business model. So you have independent representatives, distributors, consultants, there's many others. It all depends on the product. Again, you've got inexperienced marketers, you've got a focus more on offline sales, and you've got heavy social media use by the partners. All of these things are areas for you to keep in check if you have a company that falls under this business model. So monitoring focus, social media usernames and links. Obviously, again, if you've got 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 different partners, you don't want any of them to be using your name as their username in social media. Online marketplaces, there's a ton of companies that do not allow their reps to sell on online marketplaces like Craigslist or eBay. And so there's guidelines in place for that. Unauthorized websites, domains. An interesting part of this business model is that generally the way that it works is that you'll have the parent brand, and they'll give a sub-site to their reps. And then on that sub-site, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to meet with people in person. They're supposed to direct people to the sub-site where they can place an order online, and then they can continue that relationship with that particular rep. But a lot of times what will happen is the reps will go out there, register domain names. They'll create their own sites, which then maybe they'll direct to their sub-site for orders. And obviously you don't want that. It just creates more of a branding compliance type of issue. And then paid search linkings to the company provided page. So this sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but I'll go into more examples here in a second. So let's start off with the website and domain. Again, these are long on purpose, just so that you have the notes when you have the deck. So one of the things is may not create or maintain any page other than your company supplied personal page, as I mentioned. Also, any sort of domains that maybe include the brand in the domain name and then transfer or redirect to the personalized page would be a no-no. One that I think a lot of people don't really think about is the registration of email addresses. And so if you have somebody out there that's using your brand 44, whatever it is, at Yahoo or at Google or at Gmail, then they're out there advertising that fact instead of using their own personal email, that can be an issue. It could be a branding issue. And then a lot of times, depending on the product, if it's a food product or if it's financial related, you may need specific government-required disclosures on the website. I know that a lot of times income disclosures are very common across the direct selling space. So those are some different points where you need to check that they have when they're communicating with their target audience. Social media, again, it's a big thing with this vertical. Cannot create social media profiles just for sale purposes. So what this would be is where a car dealer can have a social media, Facebook or Twitter, whatever, that's for the purpose of promoting their brands. A lot of the companies in the direct selling space don't want that. They would rather have them actually using their own personal Facebook or Twitter and promoting some products to their friends and followers, versus creating an entirely new profile and then using logos and using names in the username, that sort of thing. And then the next point here, the profile picture cannot contain a logo or product images. And then I put this last bullet just because it does come up where you do usually want them to link from their social media site to their personal site or to a place where they can purchase, because that's the big element of this business model, is the fact that you have multiple people, they have a lot of friends, you want them to be able to sell via social media. You just want to keep it controlled. You don't want them to be creating profiles and doing all kinds of stuff that's not within your branding guidelines. So getting back to kind of the paid search, as I mentioned earlier, they cannot purchase keywords that contain the brand name or any other trademark. So this we've seen especially the travel and hospitality space, and that's a given. And then cannot link back to the corporate site or a shared domain site. And there's a reason for this. When you run ads on a search engine, they only typically allow one display URL. And so if that display URL is used by John Smith to send people to his subsite, then Jane Smith can't use that subdomain or that display URL to send people to her site. And so a lot of times they'll just simply put a ban on using paid ads of any sort, which is generally a good idea, especially with the direct selling space. Marketplaces, again, cannot sell products on online marketplaces or auction sites. Same reason that it essentially is for person to person, and so when you start having people on marketplaces selling product, then you end up with price wars and more channel conflict that way. So just some examples of how maybe some social media profiles could look, where you have a brand and a representative. You generally want to avoid these and refer them back to where they can have their own followers and direct traffic using their own links on their personal social media profiles. Okay, insurance. So this is the last of the four industry-focused pieces that we're going to be looking at. And insurance is interesting and follows along with, say, real estate or financial industry as well, in that it's very highly regulated. There's rules around what you can say, how you say it, what ads you can put up, and then there's also very large penalties for noncompliance. So a lot of times what you're looking for is unauthorized domains, because then that kind of moves it outside of the sphere of the brand controlling the advertising and into the agent or independent rep putting up whatever they want up. And if you don't know about that domain, then that could be a real serious issue. And then along with that is the website content, is if they do have their own domain or if you let them have their own domain, then what is that content and how is it communicated to potential customers? And then finally, social media use, and you're seeing a lot of social media use across the board here. So some examples from the insurance industry here is domains and websites. So you would have highly restricted advertising policies in place in all online channels, so whether it's domains or websites. A lot of times the brand has to provide the material. Any unique content has to be provided, has to be approved by a compliance department. It's just when you talk about these very restricted industries, this is something that is necessary to keep consistency and to keep from the agents infringing on any regulations or violating any regulations. So specific disclosures must be used on websites and email communications, and then a lot of times brand updates like new logos, they require additional compliance efforts because you don't want those out of date. And that's true for really any brand. And then social media, Certain types of communications are prohibited. Something that might be allowed for, let's say, a car dealer would not be allowed for a insurance agent or for somebody selling financial products. And then there's even a lot of times requirements on the profiles that they include an insurance number, or they include a phone number or their full name or that sort of thing. So that's something to keep in mind. So we've got an example here. It's basically just showing that if you have a logo that you need to update, you need to go out and find all the instances where that logo is located. And it's a great candidate for a soft letter communication because maybe the agent didn't know that the logo was updated, so that should be part of how you're communicating with them. But you can go out, you can find all the instances, you can communicate them to your partners with the soft letter, which I've got an example next. And this also brings up the idea of the workflow and how you would go about communicating with your partners and the different things that you need to have in place. And so that's the focus of the next section here, which is the workflow and remediation section. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. All right, on to part 2. So I think we're doing okay on time. The workflow and remediation section starts off with a strong agreement. So in all instances here, you need to have as strong an agreement as possible. And that's also part of the reason for showing examples from across different industries, because in your particular industry, if you look at your agreement, maybe you hadn't thought of some of these other problems that are apparent to other industry participants. So from a webinar example like this, you can think, oh, well, I like that. We'll add that to our agreement. It makes sense. The next piece is the proactive monitoring. That is something that we'll get into here in a second, just looking at the different areas that you can monitor, and we've kind of gone through that throughout this presentation. And then finally, the selective action. These are your partners. They are trusted with your brand, and you have a relationship with them. So it's different from an infringer that maybe is out there counterfeiting your product or typo squatting on your domain with no connection to you, no relationship. And so that's why we put selective action. You want to be able to prioritize and communicate in a well thought out and formal manner. Oops, one too far. Okay. So this is a little bit generic, but this is kind of a typical workflow. So you've got automated monitoring across the various channels. When it comes to the internet, you have so many different corners where your partners can be active that you may not even know about. And so to have an automated monitoring solution in place is critical. Once that huge deluge of data comes in, you need to somehow filter it and categorize it. You need to look at it, take action. You need to prioritize it into what is causing you the most brand harm. And you're going to have some big fish in there. You may have a lot of little fish that don't bring in revenue. And I know that some of our customers really they look at the dollar amount of the person that's creating the infringement to kind of guide them on how they communicate with them. And then obviously if there are internal relationships, if you've got a compliance department that has a relationship, that's one of the best ways to start to take action. But on the take action piece, a soft letter is the best approach to start with, because you don't know if that partner is intentionally violating or if they are doing it and they're just unsure of the policies. Once you've established that and they're still violating, perhaps you need to do a more assertive letter or reach out with a phone call. You could talk through the whoever owns that relationship within the company might be the next best bet. And then you need to have some teeth. You need to have something in there that where you can withhold their commissions, you can remove them from the program, whatever it is. There needs to be some sort of a if they don't perform action X, then you perform action Y, and that's something that they stand up and pay attention to. And then getting back to the agreement piece is you want to continuously look at your agreement, and you want to be revising it for future issues or for issues that you're seeing today that you're trying to prevent in the future. So, I talked a lot about social media, and that's because it's something that is, well, not entirely new. It's something that maybe if you haven't revised your partner agreement in the last 3 or 4 years, it's something that should be in there now. And then you need to communicate those changes to your partners so that they're aware of them and that they can't use the ignorance excuse and say, well, we didn't know about it, you didn't tell us, we don't read 50 pages of agreements. And so it's sort of a cycle, right? And as you come across these different types of abuse, you update your policies, you talk to your partners, you work through the different action steps, and through all of this, you hopefully will have a healthy program. And across the different channels that you can monitor, so I'm backtracking a little bit here just to summarize some of the different areas where you'd want to focus your attention on. Your domain names came up a lot, website content came up a lot, and then looking at things that maybe you hadn't thought about, such as hidden text or meta text, your title tags, the alt tags for logos or for images, that sort of thing. And then social media, where if you haven't updated your policy, you've got to get some of these things in there, usernames, image rules around images and links, the content of posts if necessary. Marketplace and auction sites, again, might not apply to your particular industry, but if you have a direct marketing company or a company that offers physical products, or if there are physical products perhaps like where you have a service but it's branded into physical products, that might be on marketplaces, that would be something worth looking at. An area that we didn't cover a whole lot is mobile apps. So a lot of times you might have franchisees, for example, that create their own apps. And you'll want to at least police that, take a look, see what's out there. They may be using your image, your logos improperly. Customers that look for your brand in the app stores may come across 5 different versions and they're not sure where to go. Email content. So this is definitely something to look for if you're in a regulated industry that regulates the email communications, if they require disclosures and that sort of thing. So across all these different channels, you can see, there's a large number of places where your partners can, deviate from your rules and regulations and start sending your customers scratching their heads and perhaps causing some potential channel conflict between the different partners. So definitely all these areas are something to look at. And I promised a sample letter. So this is a sample letter from our managed services team, where if you're looking at a partner that maybe you're not sure if they know about the rules, you want us to reach out, you want to explain the violation, you want to tell them what you detected, where it's wrong, how they can correct the issue, you're providing a solution. And then you want to obviously include verification and contact so they can reach out to you, they can voice their concerns, they can dispute it, whatever it is. You want to open the dialogue, have that communication channel going so that they can respond and feel that they're being listened to, because again, these are your trusted partners. They're not an anonymous infringer on the street. And lastly here are just some final tips, to remember that these are partners, that they may not be aware they're violating agreement. I like to think of a 3 strikes approach, which I've been talking about here. and you want to remove your repeat infringers, your large-scale abusers. That's kind of part of that prioritization process. The bad apple scenario, I didn't talk about that a whole lot, but essentially if you have one person that's out there violating your brand and other people see that are also your partners, they're going to do the same thing. Or they're going to at the very least point to them and say, why are they doing that when I could be doing that, or I'm not allowed to do that. And so you want to take care of those bad apples as quickly as you can. And then we did hit on the prevention, rewriting agreements to cover common loopholes. This should be a document that's a living document that you're constantly updating, and you're looking at new areas where there are potentials for abuse, and you're evolving your document. And so I put in the last little blue box there. Comprehensive plan is critical to the success of your partner program. You know, it's no easy feat to create and monitor and manage and repeat, you know, all of the elements that go into a comprehensive and a successful partner plan. But I think that the benefits are definitely worth it when you have these expert marketers out there extending your brand to new customers that you may not be able to touch with your corporate messaging. It's a very lucrative channel, and so it just takes a little bit of care and feeding for it to be to really provide that ROI that is such a benefit to every company. So I believe that's all I've got, and we will move on to some questions.
Thanks so much, Dan. That was a great overview. So we're going to start our Q&A session. As a quick reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them via the Q&A tab on your screen. We did have some questions come in, so let's just take a look at them. All right, so the first question, so great examples and information, but before you can enforce on these restrictions, shouldn't you have partner branding guidelines in place first?
And the answer obviously is yes. I think that probably question came in before I went into part two, but you know, you definitely need those strong partner guidelines in place that are also fair to your partners. And then once those are clear and concise and your partners know about them, then you can start enforcing and you can refer back to them when you're dealing with your partners. So, yep.
Do you have a recommendation of good resources to help create these policies/rules within a partner agreement? We don't have them today and would need assistance to build a comprehensive agreement, at least first pass.
Yeah, so, you know, to be honest, our managed services team is a great resource. When I was a supervisor of a number of different analysts, we commonly came on situations where our clients needed a little bit of assistance in, you know, looking out there and like I was talking about, where you're seeing new abuse and you're rewriting the existing agreement to match kind of that threat, the multiple threats that are out there from your partners. And so I would say from our perspective, obviously you can reach out to Mark Monitor and we can help you get those policies written.
So the next question, can you expand a bit on cloaking? What exactly is that and what threats does it present?
Okay, so cloaking is, there's a few different like technical ways that you can talk about cloaking. So the examples that I brought up in this presentation were for paid search and for organic listings on the search engine. So essentially, the search engines have, they're dependent on what you tell them when you first sign up to create your ad. For example, let me give you an example. So if I say that I am selling clothing and I put up an ad that is going to one URL, then the search engine will scan that page and they'll look and they'll see, what is going on there. Cloaking is where you actually are redirecting your visitors to something different. And so the examples that we've seen it in from a brand protection perspective are where you actually have an ad maybe that shows the customer's brand, or in this case your brand, and then it will go to a page that's unrelated, and then it'll again redirect to the actual company's site with maybe an affiliate code. And so you're hiding the fact that you are directing people to that final destination. And again, that also works with the organic results where you're hiding where you ultimately send the visitors, but you're hiding it from the search engine, if that makes sense. And so the threats that it presents are that you don't have control over, or you have less control over where your customers are going. If you're out there and you see a number of different sites and you think, okay, those are legitimate sites, when in fact it looks like a legitimate site, but then it's sending customers off somewhere else, then that's a big problem. So there's definitely a lot more, I probably didn't do it justice, but there's some different things online that you can research for cloaking, but just in terms of what we see, that's kind of in a nutshell.
Okay. Our next question, how can this be applied to other industries like banking?
So banking, again, would depends on the actual business model. So if you're looking at from a financial rep perspective, then I would say it's in line with like the insurance example that we gave. You can use a lot of the same guidelines and different types of restrictions on your agents in a highly restricted industry like banking. Also, there's different rules. I know that, and I'm not sure the actual acronym, but there was some rules recently about the social media use for the financial industry and how those are allowed or not allowed. And so that would be something that you would take a look at specific to that industry.
Okay, the next one. You talked about negative matching keywords. Can you explain more about that? Sure.
So negative match is essentially where, again, if you are broad, so let me back up a little bit. So you put out an ad as an advertiser. So let's say you're a online travel agency. You're going to put up ads. The brand doesn't want those ads to be shown when that brand's name is searched for. And so the negative match is in place so that any combination of words that include that brand, it doesn't matter what they are, will not show that ad. And an example that's different from kind of what we're talking about, but I believe even Google uses this. But if I have a shoe store and I've got people that are looking for shoes, I might negative match the word used, so that anything somebody's looking for used shoes, I don't want to show my ad. I only want to show my ad to people looking for new shoes. So that would be kind of the simplified version.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dan, for such a great presentation today. We appreciate you sharing your experiences as well as some best practices for our audience today. I'd also like to thank everyone for tuning in. Your questions always help draw out further information for those listening in. Now, as a reminder, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar's presentation slides and a recording within the next couple of days. So you can be on the lookout for that email. That concludes our webinar for today. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone.